Most movie premieres are supposed to be glitzy nights of grand celebration as a film's cast and crew reunites to view their hard work together for the first time, typically in front of a 1,000-strong audience. I tell you, there was nothing like that feeling of walking down that maroon rug and shaking hands with the greats and then having your picture taken in front of Bad Bold Boys Bonanza 3 Golden Boldies. What a time. And yet, for some, it can turn into a right nightmare, as you might get snubbed for an invite, the film might be a pile of crap, and even worse, your tuxedo t-shirt might get a mustard stain on and you'll have to hide behind Jason Statham all night to avoid looking like a right silly fella. So let's look at some of the times that Tinseltown was painted red, but not with booze or drugs, but with pure rage on the opening night. As I'm Jules, this is Whatculture.com, and these are 10 times that actors were pissed off at film premieres. Number 10. Adrien Brody wasn't told his role was mostly cut, the thin red line. Though it's fair to say that Terrence Malick has a reputation for ruthlessly cutting actors from his movie if the feeling strikes him, and it does a lot, the filmmaker didn't gain this notoriety until the release of his classic 1998 war epic, The Thin Red Line. You see, while the movie was being shot, Adrien Brody believed that his character, Corporal Fife, was the protagonist, as was clearly indicated by Malick's script. But when Brody attended the film's premiere, he was gobsmacked to discover that his main role had been cut down to just a few scant lines across roughly 5 minutes of screen time. Oof. As Brody himself said, it was extremely unpleasant because I'd already begun the press for a film that I wasn't really in. Still, Brody should consider himself grateful that he made it into the movie at all, given that his co-stars Bill Pullman and Mickey Rourke had their roles omitted entirely. And isn't that a strange statement, to be lucky to have your role in a film that you were definitely in at all? Number 9. David Prowse didn't know that his Darth Vader voice had been dubbed. Star Wars. The role of Star Wars' suited-up Darth Vader was played by David Prowse, while the imposing voiceover was of course provided by the legendary James Earl Jones in post-production. However, Prowse also spoke all of Vader's lines on set, and whether a result of miscommunication or not, was under the belief that his voice would indeed be used in the final film, although a West Country accent Sith Lord might have been a bit odd. Alright, my lovers, time for me to make Scrumpy out of yours. I'm from there originally, so I can do that. These are my people. So imagine his shock to find out that he definitely was not the voice of Vader. It was certainly a smart change, all things considered, though it would have simply been good etiquette to make sure that Prowse knew exactly what he was being hired for, right? Number 8. Robert Webb and Olivia Coleman were misled about their nude scenes. Confetti. 2006 rom-com mockumentary Confetti features supporting roles for Peep Show stars Robert Webb and Olivia Coleman as a pair of nudists. And given that this was a micro-budgeted film, Webb and Coleman simply performed their scenes in the buff for real. However, the duo both maintained that they only agreed to play their roles in the nude after director Debbie Izzet assured them that their genitals would be pixelated in post-production. So imagine their combined surprise when they attended the film's premiere only to discover that not a single frame of their nudity had been digitally covered up. Years later, Coleman called working on the film the worst experience of her life, adding in that she felt betrayed and that both she and Webb began legal action against the filmmakers before Webb convinced her that it wasn't helping them move past it. Number 7. Marlon Brando stormed out after the audience laughed at his accent. Mutiny on the Bounty. Marlon Brando is unquestionably one of the greatest actors who has ever lived, and also one of the worst at the same time, thanks in part to his planet-sized ego. And Mutiny on the Bounty, apart from being a great band, by the way, you should go check them out, was a great example of this. During post-production, he was noted for his commanding and difficult behavior, which reportedly contributed to the departure of the original director Carol Reed mid-shoot. At the film's New York premiere, Brando showed up wearing a naval uniform, and shortly after the screening started, his ridiculous English accent was roundly laughed at by the audience, resulting in an infuriated Brando storming out in disgust. Well, that's what you get, mate, for taking yourself too seriously. Number 6. Vilhelm Von Holberg wasn't told that he would be dubbed. Ghostbusters 2. German actor Vilhelm Von Holberg gave an intensely memorable performance in Ghostbusters 2 as the villainous Vigo. But did you know that Vigo's voice didn't actually belong to Wilhelm? Well, unfortunately though, the production didn't inform Holberg of this decision, and he only found out when attending the premiere, causing him to angrily storm out of the screening as soon as he realized what had happened. It's actually an especially sad story for Holberg, as the actor felt that his split lip, which actually caused him to slur his words, was likely for the redub, and it had been been something that was holding him back from working more in the industry. Number 5. Eric Idle accused a movie of stealing a Monty Python joke, Shrek the Third. Though John Cleese previously appeared in Shrek 2 as King Harold, he was joined by fellow Monty Python alum Eric Idle for the third film in the franchise, aptly named Shrek the Third. Idle played Merlin in the threequel, but held nothing back by disparaging the film mere days after its release for what he perceived to be an act of joke theft from his and Cleese's classic 1975 comedy Monty Python and the Holy Grail. At the start of the film, Prince Charming's dinner theatre performers use coconuts to replicate the sound of horses' hooves, which is very clearly a nod to a near-identical gag from the aforementioned Python film. Idle admitted that he was so furious at seeing his own gag repurposed that he walked out of the premiere and only returned after calming down. He claimed to consider suing DreamWorks over their unauthorized use of their joke, and when a radio host suggested that the gag was simply an homage, Idle simply said back, "Do you think if I stole your wallet that would be an homage to your money?" Number 4. Carl McLachlan didn't realize that he'd made a horrible movie, Showgirls. Before he started shooting 1995's campy cult classic Showgirls, director Paul Verhoeven had gained a reputation as one of the most daring and successful R-rated filmmakers of the late 80s and early 90s, what with the back-to-back-to-back successes of RoboCop, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct. And so there wasn't much reason to doubt that Showgirls would be another deliciously lurid plunge down the adult rabbit hole, Vicar. Well, that was until the movie began screening and it became clear that, to many, it was nothing but a laughingstock. Though Showgirls has been re-evaluated in recent years as a self-aware satire, its initial critical and commercial failure ensured that it was merely a punching bag through most of the late 90s. Rumors also persisted for years that lead actor Carl McLachlan walked out of the movie's premiere after realizing how bad it was, though by his own admission he actually sat there and suffered the whole thing for 2 hours. Oof. He also added, "I was absolutely gobsmacked. I said, this is horrible, horrible, and it's a very slow sinking feeling when you're watching the movie and the first scene comes out and you're like, oh, that's a really bad scene, and it just gets worse. I mean, I didn't really see it coming." Though Showgirls eventually found an appreciative audience, you can't really blame McLachlan for being so utterly stricken as he sat down to watch this film for the first time. Number 3. Gabriel Byrne thought he was Keyser Soze. The Usual Suspects. In an interview many years after the release of Bryan Singer's ingenious neo-noir The Usual Suspects, star Kevin Spacey confirmed that director Singer sowed seeds of doubt and paranoia throughout the ensemble during the shooting. In order to heighten the unpredictability of the shoot and encourage distrust amongst the actors, Singer convinced each member of the focal ensemble that they were indeed the movie's shadowy gangster antagonist, Keyser Soze. And so when Singer screened his first completed cut of the film for the cast, Gabriel Byrne was infuriated to discover that he wasn't in fact Soze. Byrne promptly stormed out of the screening room and argued with Singer in the parking lot for half an hour before calming down. The fact that Singer misled his cast ultimately only made their performances that much more interesting and ambiguous, so it was certainly a job well done, even accepting Byrne's understandable frustration. Number 2. Boris Karloff wasn't even invited to the premiere, Frankenstein. As annoyed as these actors may have been, justifiably or not, at least each of them was actually invited to the premiere of the bloody thing that they appeared in, right? Well, bafflingly, this wasn't the case with Boris Karloff, who of course played the definitive screen iteration of Frankenstein's monster in the 1931 classic Frankenstein. In an interview with Karloff's daughter, she stated that her father wasn't invited to the movie's premiere, and so ultimately he had to pay his own money to see the film at a public screening. She said of Universal's dismissive attitude to her dad's iconic work on the movie, he was a piece of meat to the studios at the time, as were most actors. Universal reportedly deemed Karloff an anonymous actor and therefore didn't even consider him for the premiere, seemingly unaware of quite how strong a chord his mesmerizing performance would strike with audiences worldwide. And number 1, Kenpachiro Satsuma was furious that America butchered Godzilla. Godzilla 1998. Unlike every other actor on this list, Kenpachiro Satsuma wasn't actually an actor in the movie that he was attending the premiere for. You see, Satsuma was actually invited to the premiere of Roland Emmerich's 1998 Godzilla movie because previously he'd played Godzilla throughout 1984 to 1995 in Japan. And yet, despite the invitation, he would end up walking out of the premiere stating, "It's not Godzilla, it doesn't have the spirit." And he's not wrong in any way, of course. Godzilla 1998 was widely panned by critics and indifferently received by audiences, with most of the ire directed towards the unnecessary changes made to Godzilla's design. So you know what? Respect your source material, folks.